but calling yourself technology company for the sake of technology is wrong, in my opinion. You should be emphasizing your use of technology in a way that optimizes the experience for your customers, for your users. That's how I think massaging that messaging is going to be important. Now, tech companies, they already have that cred. They use technology on an everyday basis. They're native to the technology aspects of creating a great experience, but automakers are still not. And NIO does have experience with subscriptions and services because of the battery swapping, but not many other car companies have significant experience providing services to their customers. So that's going to be a new challenge for many of them as well. And welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the last couple of weeks, most interesting and important news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome, and to our loyal listeners and viewers, welcome back. Help us get the word out about this podcast to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I'm the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course, I encourage you all to do. Lei, ready to talk to our audience, Lei, who hasn't talked to them in a couple of weeks. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I have a special... I got to go through all of these things that were missed last week and a half, but this is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and episode number 247. So let me get this off first, and then we drill down to the details. From build your dreams to build your chips, or build you chips. The larger-than-life ES9 makes Yao Ming look small, or is it the other way around? What I do know is that they both made William Li look small. Say hi to the Waymo Ojai in a Zeekr body. SAIC Motor delivers its 100 millionth vehicle to a special guest. Volvo gets a special approval from the ICE to continue to sell vehicles in the US with China content.
That's a big deal.
Introducing the Ferrari LOL chip. Both Xiaomi and Li Auto takes a brutal hit in Q1 earnings, while XPeng pushes ahead with their Robotaxi and robots plans. And how about NIO being profitable over 2 consecutive quarters, especially in the weak Q1 quarter, right? Stellantis' 60 billion euro pivot and bet on China. The name of the game is fight the Chinese with the Chinese. So that's in my
with the other Chinese.
Yeah. So it's I think it's been an epic week in terms of news and happenings.
We'll stop for a second. It's been 2 weeks since we've recorded?
Well, it's been a week and a half, right? So it's Tuesday, okay, right before the Stellantis announced their
Investor Day
strategic plan 2030, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then this past week, just whole fireworks. I mean, BYD, my goodness, it's they dropped the bomb, right?
So where do we want to begin?
Well, you can talk about BYD, build your chips.
Well, let's talk since it's top of mind. Let's talk earnings, NIO, XPeng, Li Auto.
It just shows. I mean, Wei Xiaoli, they're a special group, right? Because they're 3 U.S. listed companies, and how sudden the tide could change. Because Li Auto was at the very top. They could do no wrong. NIO was kind of like, they're in the mud trying to get out of it. And that's flip, right? Who's the hottest company in the space right now? It's NIO.
NIO.
And I mean, the number of events that William Li has done and the amount of times that he's live streaming It's all over my social.
Yeah. And
That's
I don't follow Chinese social
uh,
as much as you do, and it's on mine too. So
and Li Auto. I mean, I I don't know the last time I've seen their vehicle and gross margin fall into single digits. So they're in a
and
deep hole and they're in a reset.
and you wonder if for Li Auto anyways, and the China market, is this the canary in the coal mine? Is this a move away from EREVs, a permanent move away, or is it just specifically because Li Auto's L series vehicles, the 7, 8, 9, 6, 7, 8, and 9, maybe they're a little bit long in the tooth, especially for a China market that can't pay attention for more than 6 months or 7 months because Chinese automakers are always bringing reinforcements or additional reasons why Lei and Tu should buy their product versus a Geely or a BYD or an XPeng or an Ito or a Leap Motor or a Cherry. So
I mean, to be fair, the interesting thing for Li Auto is their big top selling model is no longer the EREV. It's the i6.
right.
It's the one that we've driven to Shanghai.
And that's good
Uh,
for them. It's a high runner. I think it'll be consistent. I think I see immediate opportunities to improve it for the next time, the next iteration, the next refresh for them. So,
well, I think their current tactic is to relaunch the L series, starting with the L9, the Livis, the L8, and then 7, 6. So it's
with the current dimensions being at least 5.2, 5.3 meters for the L9.
yeah. I mean, you talk about the Li L9 Livis is a 500,000 RMB, and then you have the NIO ES9, which is I think it's bigger, right?
It's
Uh,
it's
bigger.
5.4 meters, I want to say, and the
Starting
Ito M9 extended is also around 5.4 meters.
the M9 I think launched on the same date almost as the L9, also in the 500,000 RMB range. The
That
ESI,
with owning the battery. If you battery
yeah,
swap, it's
yeah,
57-ish, which is an unreal number. It's an
uh,
unreal starting price.
yeah, and the products they're just I mean like the ES8, it's been a runner for 7, 8, 9 months. It's one of the few models where I think it's been consistent, but I think it's reaching that stage where it's gonna taper off because of other entrants. So everybody is facing this short life period of how long do you keep a certain model fresh and hot selling? And that's the case for XPeng because now XPeng has GX as their kind of the star model. How long does that continue? So everybody is facing the
I
same
think
conundrum.
they're looking to the G7 to also be a very, very popular vehicle for them. So
G7 upcoming Mona L03. Obviously, NIO and XPeng, they do have other services revenues that Li Auto don't have. And now also Li Auto launching the Mach 100 chips, right? We talk about chips. That's another thing that has happened pretty quickly that more and more are coming out with their own SoCs.
So right now, we know that NIO is fabbing its own silicon. We know that XPeng is fabbing its own silicon with a immediate opportunity to sell some of them to Volkswagen.
Yep,
And we see
that's coming.
BYD now with the Tianji. Is it called the Tianji? Xuanji. And so that's 4 nanometer. So we're getting close to NVIDIA level innovation on some of that stuff. And there are Chinese scientists who are trying to create or develop capital equipment that isn't necessary for ASML, for Lam Research, for KLL, for all those capital equipment makers that have limitations on who they can sell to in China. So it feels like an arms race in the silicon design industry as well now. So
Huawei announcing the Tau. What was it? Was it 1.4 or 1.2 nanometer? With this
yeah,
logic voting tech that Jensen's kind of like, well, TSMC, they've been doing that for years. It's not new. Pushing the boundaries. I think
what's important here, Lei, is not that the size of
no.
It's that you can mass produce at the smallest sizes.
Yeah.
And SMIC, I've been told by several people, is years away from the knowledge, experience, and know-how that TSMC has. So it's not just, if I can get my hands on this equipment, I can build the most high-end chips, AI chips in the world. It's that, okay, there's a wafer, if you have a yield of 20% versus 60% versus 70%, that's a huge difference. And that's a cost difference that is very, very meaningful. If you can only pull 20% yields, 30% yields versus, 70, 80, 90% yields, which TSMC always pushes towards when they develop a new technology in manufacturing or fabrication process.
Yeah, and TSMC helps many of these Chinese, right, SOCs anyways.
So let me ask you this, Lei, and I know we're a few days away, so maybe it's something you and I familiarize ourselves with as we talk about it. What were your thoughts on, give me 3 high-level bullet points of your thoughts on Stellantis Investor Day, and let's just break that down.
Well,
so for those, let me stop there.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Stellantis last Thursday or Tuesday, one of the had an Investor Day, invited a bunch of folks to Auburn Hills. Yeah. Invited a bunch of folks to Auburn Hills to unveil the strategy moving forward up through 2030 with Filosa now as the CEO of the company. And it was fairly comprehensive, down to number of products, down to brands that are going to be focused on. So I think what was important to me was they're going to concentrate on 4 global brands: Fiat, Ram, Dodge, and Citroen, right?
Yeah.
Was it those 4?
I think you got those right, yeah. Jeep. I think Jeep was one of it. One of the
Jeep.
4.
So not Dodge, Jeep. It was Jeep and Ram, I think. And then the numbers that kind of stood out to me was 44 months to 24 months by 2030, and that's the product development cycle. The 60 billion that you had mentioned, he must have mentioned partnerships. He said that word a lot, and so they're going to rely heavily on those partnerships. And then what I think a lot of people might not have known was also they had these separate press events after the major announcement to detail a little bit more. And some of the media outlets did a very good job of summarizing some of those details. But what were your takeaways from Investor Day for Stellantis last week?
Well, obviously, we'll look at this from a China lens, is that Stellantis, according to their annual report 2025, they sold 43,000 vehicles in China in 2025.
That's a rounding.
Probably the lowest among top 10 global automakers. Yet, they're the most integrated when it comes to Chinese. Leapmotor, Dongfeng being their partners, both providing platforms and architectures for the Citroen CSUV, a top-of-the-line Peugeot model, D segment. I think that stood out to me. And then whatever they already announced before then, reproducing Jeep in the DPCA joint venture.
Yes.
And then that's for both China and export. So I think one thing that clearly stood out to me is now China as a manufacturing and export base for these foreign automakers, multinational foreign automakers, to expand their reach in the regions that may be closer to China, Southeast Asia, even South America. I think that was mentioned. They're going all in. Chinese more so than any other foreign automakers outside of China. That's what I'm reading.
And that sentiment in London for the Financial Times seemed to be echoed by many automakers. And effectively, I read it as we can't successfully execute this plan without continuing to maintain and even deepening our partnerships with certain players, specifically the Chinese. So Stellantis is going to be building vehicles for Dongfeng in Europe.
Yeah.
I think that's a big deal.
Leap Motor, possibly. That's the other side of it. What's in it for Leap Motor and Dongfeng? Well, they become more international thanks to Stellantis.
For Leap Motor and Dongfeng is to drive down component costs because they're sharing sourcing platforms.
And then Dongfeng and Stellantis setting up a similar international sales joint venture like the Leap Motor International. So these two kind of models are helping these two Chinese companies globalize, whereas the other NIO, XPeng, they're doing it on their own. So that's kind of the difference.
Advantage Leap Motor.
Yeah, would that be win-win? It's tactically very interesting amid the kind of the narrative in some certain countries. We talked about Volvo getting the ICTS approval, which means you can always talk.
And I wonder if there's a gentleman's agreement between Stellantis and Leap Motor to say, we won't compete directly in too many markets, whether it's the Fiat brand versus the Leap Motor brand, especially in Europe. Does Fiat use Leap Motor IP and sell clean energy vehicles into Italy? A friend of ours, Glenn Mercer, he's in Italy right now, and he said that he did not see too many Chinese vehicles on the streets. And so,
okay. Well, that's surprising because Italy, I know, is one of the top markets for Leap Motor in terms of growth, but
still small base for Leap Motor, small base.
Sure.
Because I think 49,000 cars were exported by Leap Motor in Q1, I want to say, maybe, I don't know. But the other number that stood out to me was that Filosa reduced his management team from 30 people to 15.
Yeah.
I think it sounds meaningful. Whether it's symbolic or not, we'll figure this out because this. I've always said that if these companies don't have the technical capabilities, they lose anyways. Even if they have the technical capabilities, which we have to assume that they do, they still need to change culture. And in order to change the speed at which they do things, probably flatten out. And I think that's what Filosa is trying to do with his organization. Now, it gets really, really complicated at that point because he still has to deal with some unions. I think he didn't address anything about eliminating brands. So he did mention the 4 global brands and everything else is going to be regional under that. So
the regional and then the historic plus Maserati. Yeah.
Do you think that Maserati gets bought eventually?
Not out of the question.
Do you think it makes sense for BYD to bring them into the fold?
Well, I don't know. BYD has a lot on their plate right now. They're trying to enter Formula One. They've already launched the Denza. I don't know.
And it's the weirdest thing. They want to enter Formula One, but they don't make any engines anymore. So do they buy the engines? So
maybe. Who knows? But the other interesting thing was the fact that this was held in Auburn Hills in the U.S., in Michigan. All of their regional presidents, brand chiefs, and then when you talk about China, it's kind of always sensitive. And what happens in North America, I don't think there was any clear indication of what happens there, but it's definitely in the back burner. But everywhere outside of China and the U.S., anything could be possible at this point.
So let's talk about let's take a step back. Did you follow the ES9 launch very closely?
I followed it a little bit. I watched the live stream. Yeah. I mean,
so do you think Yao Ming is an appropriate ambassador for, and he's not a NIO ambassador, he is an ES9 ambassador.
Well, he's the ES9 CEO, Chief Experience Officer, whatever that means. No, I think he's a great ambassador, certainly because of his size. And because of his influence as a kind of a Chinese success story of a Chinese person or maybe even a brand.
He's a
Having
global
played,
influence, by the way,
yeah,
not just a Chinese influence.
having played in the NBA, and I think he's very smart on the way he talks and communicates things. The video that they put out was quite good because he talked
The one
about
that he
so I think it's perfect that he talked about the taller you are, the harder you fall,
right.
and just speaks to kind of what Neil went through, right? Getting so big and so much on the plate. So yeah, I mean they picked pretty interesting people for their launches, right? The singer, Chinese Hong Kong singer, the actor, the Hong Kong actor for the ONVO is a great pick. Couldn't be better.
Yeah, and then
But I mean, the ES9, I think is going to continue what happened to the ES8 in that kind of the price range segment because it's such a value for money type of vehicle where if you think about it, right, I tweeted that 9 years ago, that would have been the price for the ES8, the original ES8. And now you have this in battery as a service mode. It's under 400,000 RMB.
Lei Xing, who didn't speak English this time, was on CNBC, and I watched a little bit of his interview.
Yeah.
And he basically said that things have kind of settled out. The good old days are over. The golden era in China is over. And so he said that the companies are leaning into technology. I kind of reading in between the lines, he was like, yeah, the intense price war is still here, but we can't call it involution. We just, it can't be called that. So we're going to continue to put the pressure on our competitors. And they did that with a $57,000 price point for the ES9 because that thing would sell well over $100,000 in the US market, well over.
Yeah. And then he says something about now people are probably looking more at certain brands rather than brand does matter now, premium. And he talked about in the first quarter, I tweeted this, that average selling price of NIO was 50,000 RMB above a BMW and 50% higher than Audi, which is
They compared that to the average selling price of a Xiaomi was $34,500. Just FYI. So I think Lei Xing is trying to will that into existence, like brand does matter, because still most companies are trying to redefine themselves, whether it's Huawei, whether it's XPeng, Stellantis, GM, they're all calling themselves technology companies. But calling yourself technology company for the sake of technology is wrong, in my opinion. You should be emphasizing your use of technology in a way that optimizes the experience for your customers, for your users. That's how I think massaging that messaging is going to be important. Now, tech companies, they already have that cred. They use technology on an everyday basis. They're native to the technology aspects of creating a great experience, but automakers are still not. And NIO does have experience with subscriptions and services because of the battery swapping, but not many other car companies have significant experience providing services to their customers. So that's going to be a new challenge for
and then
many
if
of them as
you
well.
compare NIO of today with maybe just 2-3 years ago, they're a lot more efficient in terms of launching a model and getting it delivered in quantity at scale. The rhythm, the planning, the rhythm. Also, some of the discipline, which is reflected in their earnings, although its caveat is it's non-GAAP operating earnings. They're still losing money, but I mean, you compare that with what happened to Li Auto, right? It's completely left and right. And then they're sticking to the goal of breaking even on a non-GAAP basis for the year, which I think looks promising because of the ES9, the ES8. I think they should be able to do it. I'll be surprised if they don't, given the current momentum.
One of the things that isn't really talked about in the media is why BYD is such a monster. Geely is are such monsters is because they do have that volume already that goes through their factories. So there's a lot of learning that they've done as they've ramped to the millions of units in annual volume. And we're starting to see that with the NIOs and the XPengs as they consistently hit 60, 70,000 units, hopefully more, because I think XPeng is talking about between 100 and 110,000 units in Q2. But it's those low runners that has really gotten NIO some of that increased volume, the ONVOs and the Fireflies to a lesser extent. And let's say they sell those things at cost, it really creates a lot of flexibility for them for the ES7 or the ES8 and the ES9 to try to create profits from those vehicles.
Yeah, and NIO, I think their messaging has always that they pride on originality, tech development, and now it's translating through sales and profitability. And I'm hearing their updated new world model for the ADAS part of it is pushing them possibly to the first tier of these capabilities. I mean, there's been a lot of videos going around. So
I do want to ask NIO next time I'm in town to borrow an ES9. I do want to try one out.
there's so many vehicles that we want to get our hands on. The Li Auto L9, the XPeng GX, the NIO
I want it to
ES9.
drive me so I can sit in the back seat, man. So I can freaking do the recline.
I mean, Yao Ming sitting in the second row. I mean, still ample space, right? But he did make Li Bin look like a hobbit. Sorry, Li Bin, but that's how he looked. It was so funny, yeah.
So let me talk about my week and a half. I get home from China, spend the week at home, say hi to my kids, and then I'm off to Montreal.
You're like, bye-bye.
He was invited by a company called Stingray. They are doing in-vehicle infotainment.
Stingray is in my Tesla, so my daughter has tried it. Quite interesting.
Yeah, right? And so they are providing karaoke to BYD vehicles.
Yeah.
And, Jim Riley, who's the president, he is a subscriber in the newsletter. And, a lot of times, hey, I'm going to be in Munich for the auto show. He reaches out, stopped by our booth, met him. And so Stingray sponsored a media conference in Montreal where they're headquartered. And it just so happened to be the same weekend as F1, the Grand Prix, the Canadian Grand Prix. And so I went, participated in a speaking panel with LG and with Bloomberg Media. So the 2-day conference, I learned so much because you and I are in the mobility space, but how content is consumed nowadays, how content is created, which platforms are popular amongst which demos, and which apps are trying to create partnerships across these platforms. It was really, really, really interesting. LG had a huge presence. I didn't realize they were such large players in the media part, but then I come home and I have an LG TV and they have the web OS with all the apps. So I'm now able to connect some dots that I never was able to connect before. And so, first of all, thanks to Jim, Rick, Dave, and Eric, the entire Stingray team. And then I stayed for work for fun, and we were the one corporate booth away from the starting line.
Wow.
And
so it was,
it's a unique experience. And every day until Sunday, it was sunny and it wasn't hot, but we were covered. And so it was a great experience because they had Formula 2 races and they had qualifying, they had the sprint. So I no details on F1. I'd never been to an F1 event, didn't follow it. So I'm peppering people with questions like, what does this mean? What does that mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? And so learned a lot. Unfortunately, didn't have paddock access, but everything but. Like, we're in this corporate booth. They brought in lunch. They brought in snacks. And then it's a weird experience because you sit there at one part of the track and the loop is a little over a minute long. So these drivers every minute they pass by. So the one thing I will mention is like lap 62 or something like that, or 60 of 68. Lewis Hamilton went
Overtakes.
around Verstappen, overtook
Yep.
Verstappen, and so that was around the first hairpin. So I'm looking, and it's in the distance, and I saw it happen in real time. So I did get to see that, and like, yeah, it was actually really cold, and on Sunday, but it's on an island in
Island.
Montreal.
Yeah,
You had to go there, and
I watched it on Netflix. So yeah.
yeah, and then we had dinner after the F1 race, and then I went to sleep for like 2 hours and took the 6 a.m. flight back to Michigan in order to try to spend Memorial Day with my family. And then earlier this week, so I spent one day back in Michigan, and then I drove to
Drive
Mackinac for the
down.
policy conference. And thank you to Glenn, to Paul, and to Drew for inviting me to the Mich Auto event. I stayed at the Grand Hotel for an evening, and they have a special dinner. So got to see Collar Hellebuck, and I forget the woman's name, and I suck, but she was also a gold medal winner. Both
Oh,
grew up in Michigan, and then the final panel discussion was with Tom Izzo, Dusty May, Jalen
nice.
Rose, and Greg Kelser. So there's a lot of healthy, friendly ribbing going on between the Michigan and Michigan State folks. But what a
Yeah.
great day and a half that I spent in Mackinac. So
Jalen Rose is a brand ambassador for Dream E because he was
yeah,
at
I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah.
Really?
So I'm looking at Ford Motor. Its stock is up almost 50% over the last month.
Yeah.
Not in my bingo card.
So they have
Uh,
pivoted towards energy storage.
Energy. Yeah. Yeah. So
So and I did get a chance to sit down and talk to Bob Lee, Joe White and I did, who is the LG North America head.
mm,
So that was a very interesting conversation. More to come on that later. What the reason we were invited up, Joe and I, basically Glenn Stevens, who's the director at Mich Auto, wanted us to give an unfiltered overview of what we think the current automotive landscape, global automotive landscape looks like. And it was a private session, so there's about 50 executives, including some CEOs that were sitting in there. And it was, Joe and I we're not pulling any punches. So, but we did get a lot of positive feedback about the things that we said. And, what I can say is we talked about China, obviously. We talked about, and this is nothing new for the folks that are listening to China EVs and More. As we pivot towards China, the technology company threat is looming large. And, I emphasized one of the ways that we're keeping China out is through our data restrictions. But this Volvo, approval now kind of does that open the door to the Chinese? It seems like it might,
it's levered.
and I could totally see one or two companies taking a chance saying, despite this 100% tariffs, try to start importing into the US.
I mean, the leverage. So the Geely being a parent company aside, so Volvo is almost a 100-year-old company. They were founded in 1927, right? They've been in the US for 71 years. And then they've invested, I don't know how much money they put that in the news release. So those are all leverage, right? And it kind of pretends what could happen if you are like that. I mean, and the possibility of that South Carolina production base
Which
that they
is
could open up.
probably at a 50% capacity utilization rate. It's very low.
And so BYD, I think we should touch up on BYD. We've seen the chips, we've seen the press conference, we've seen Wang Chuanfu. I love when Wang Chuanfu, when he speaks, and then he drops the bomb and then he laughs. He's like, I love when he does that, like, and So the price war, this is what I'm thinking. BYD elevating how the price war is done by covering your asses. If you're in the city NOA mode, if anything happens, they will cover all the cost involved in an accident. That's
including intelligent parking.
Yes, so too. So that's the latest non-price price war that's
Yeah.
other people may have to be forced to follow. Because remember,
for the first year,
ago,
they're going to do it for the first year.
in 2023, when this thing was started, it was Tesla announced a price cut, and then BYD followed with the Champion and the Honor editions, right? Kind of the refreshing products. And now the price war, basically, you don't see that anymore. You just see refreshed product launches packing more punch, but at the same price. And now BYD is saying, we're going to be a fallback for a year.
And they also are trying to comply to the 60-day payment terms.
Yeah, those are right. Those are completely, they're right. I saw some bar charts of their, once that's gone. Yeah. And then the other part of it is just the chip part of it is, I think a lot of people don't realize that they've been at this for almost a quarter century.
Yeah,
There was a story of Wang Chuanfu at the airport on 9/11 in Europe because he was on a trip trying to source and trying to buy chip companies. This was in 2001, well before they moved into making cars. And then they had this unit set up in 2002, I think, for IC integrated circuit design unit. So it's just a matter of time.
To me, batteries and silicon design and fabrication, simple fabrication is foundational and part of their DNA. It's not something they've developed, a muscle they've developed recently. It's foundational to who BYD is.
Yeah. So. BYD is an electronics company. It's a battery company. And now it's a chip company. Wang Chuanfu joked. He said if they'd had that success during the .com bubble, they could have been probably the world's leading chip company now. Yeah.
Well, he would have to buy a leather jacket like Jensen Huang and effectively fly the world promoting NVIDIA or, BYD that way. So,
but then here's the thing, right? So this has been announced. Yeah, it's awfully difficult, I think, in the current competitive environment. Even with that, even with these ADAS features as standardized, low prices, it's still extremely difficult to sell. That's the competition everyone is confronting these days. So, yeah.
That's why, to me, I just feel in my heart that BYD is going to be a player. They're going through all these challenges and struggles right now. But, one thing I mentioned to journalists that I talked to this week was that I think Wang Chuanfu and Stella Li are getting a much better appreciation of what Toyota has been able to accomplish because they're seeing much more intense competition from the domestic market, which is foundational for them to get to the 10 million unit to compete on Toyota's level. And the path to 10 million is now much slower for them because every Chinese player, or I won't say this, anywhere BYD is, there's likely more than one Chinese player that is also competing against them.
2 years ago, when I think BYD was on the high, Li Auto was on the high, we were looking 2 years ago thinking that Li Auto could be doing 1 million units by now. Around this time, we were thinking about BYD doing 6 million. And look where reality is now.
They'll be lucky to be flat. I think they'll probably, and I don't know what would worry me from the ratio standpoint of exports to domestic sales, but they gotta continue to grow in China, even if it's much more difficult.
Yeah, speaking of pivot, I think Li Bian, he recently looks like they're kind of retooling the European business a bit, maybe walking back a little bit from the tactics and strategies and focus on the Chinese market more.
Well, because they're selling in the tens in
Yeah.
some markets in Europe.
And
So
whereas XPeng, right, their goal is definitely, I mean, Brian talked about it, Hui Xiaopeng talked about it, is accounting. I mean, I think in April, overseas accounted for 20%. And in 5 years, they want that to be 50%. And they're
that's
actually looking, the other guy that you went the conference, the UK guy, talked about looking for a new production facility. They have 3 overseas now. So Li Auto, this is a big year for their
well, yeah.
international.
So tell us what
Right.
their big announcement about exporting is. Their
So,
international strategy. What's
so
their linchpin?
first, they're exhibiting at the Paris Motor Show. Second, they're launching the i6 there. i6 is a $35,000 EV.
I'm curious to see
250,000.
where it lands pricing wise in Europe. I'm curious to
Yeah,
see that.
yeah. I mean, 50,000 euros, probably still a good deal. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I like it. It's not super distinctive to me styling wise. I like the interior, but it's nice. At 35,000, it was nice. At
It
50,000 euros,
handles them right,
I
but
just don't know at 50 to 55,000 euro if that's something that is going to be super competitive at that price point in Europe. So, because then you're pulling in BYDs, you're pulling in XPengs and things like that.
and then by next
You know,
year, Xiaomi will be there. I mean, Xiaomi officially, right, second half launch in Europe, 2027.
because I'll be honest with you, and I haven't driven the G7 yet, but price being equal, I'd probably lean G7 than i6. So anyways, man, that's
Okay,
all I
yeah,
really have.
yeah, same here. Just kind of an epic week to end May.
Yeah. Well, my sons get out of school on the 3rd, so summer officially begins on the 4th, and I'm going to try to be a homebody for most of summer. So
Yeah, my daughter is going to France today, so we'll be
really
free.
nice
The two of us will be free for about 10 days.
for volleyball or
No, just a school trip.
wow, dude, that's fancy. That's
Yeah,
fancy, man.
yeah.
So
So,
you and your wife can go party. You're gonna sleep early is what you're gonna do. So,
well,
anyways,
by the time we get to our age, first of all, you never sleep early, and second, you never wake up late.
so yeah, I'm trying to get back to a normal sleep routine. But everyone, as always, thanks for joining us. We should be normal time, normal
Yeah,
place
I'm
next
good
week as
in
well.
June. I'm good in June. Yep.
So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We will talk with you all next week.
Bye bye.